Hi, and welcome to a special edition of Coffee with Waymark. Today's episode, you have the whole team again here, and we're trying to answer that question of who had it better between baby boomers who were born between 1946 and 1964, following World War II, who are currently between ages 62 and 80, versus millennials, which were born in between 1981 and 1996 who are currently between the ages of 30 and 45. So today, I believe Hanifa is going to take the stance from a millennial's point of view, and Brendan will be doing the view from the baby boomers viewpoint. So we'll start off with Brendan first, and we'll give him about a minute, and then we'll go to Hanifa after them. So, Brendan, what do you got for us?
All right, thank you, Your Honor. I will be presenting to the court today that I'm actually defending the baby boomers, even though I'm actually Gen X. Baby boomers ended about 10 years prior to me being born. But I'll argue on their behalf. You hear from millennials all the time that they have it so tough, and I would actually argue that boomers had it just as tough. The two things that you're going to hear from Hanifa is that there are two issues specifically. One is that housing is out of control and student loans is out of control, and it's hurting their affordability. But the stats and the statistics actually show that housing, for instance, we're pretty much on par. One of the things that boomers actually had to deal with back in the early 80s, if you remember, were double-digit interest rates and mortgage rates. So they were looking at like up to 18% on their first home. Put that into Hanifa's language, and you think about a $500,000 house, you're looking at almost $10,000 of interest. Excuse me, $100,000 of interest on that. If there's a 20%, if you're mortgaging 500,000 and you're paying almost 20%, that's just astronomical, and they had to deal with that. Not to mention the times, you had the early 80s, late 70s, you were just coming off the Vietnam War. The country was in shambles. We had the Iran hostage crisis, all sorts of geopolitical drama that was going on. And then finally, we get to the college situation. This is where I will give Hanifa some credit, and I'm sure Hanifa will throw some stats at you, some fancy stats, that the student loan debt that boomers had was significantly lower than millennials. And I am going to stipulate that that's actually truthful. The challenge is that millennials have choice. They can go to state schools and pay significantly less and take on significantly less in debt. But with that said, ultimately, wrap this all up, I think it's the choices that millennials are making is making their lives a lot more difficult than the boomers did.
All right. Thank you for your perspective, Brendan. And I have to politely disagree with you there. So we'll start with housing. I'll agree that, interest rates were higher than the 7% that we're currently looking at, but also the cost of a home was a lot lower. So right now, if you're looking at a starter home, and we'll use Arizona and Massachusetts as an example, so homes are starting at maybe 600,000, whereas a starter home when a baby boomer was 30 might have been $100,000 to $200,000. I think that significantly impacts cash flow, for one, making home ownership tougher for millennials. And then the other thing is school. Student loans are out of control. That's like one of the biggest issues that the country is facing right now. And while we do have the choice to go to a state school, we're kind of playing a different game now where it's a lot more competitive in the workforce. You can't just get a bachelor or associate degree and be as successful as you would be without a master's degree. And a lot of people, I chose to go to a state school because of the cost, but you can argue that there would have been a difference in success had I chosen to go to somewhere like Bentley, just for that higher network or bigger access to a network. So it is about choice, but I think it's just a lot more competitive in the workforce now than it was 30 years ago. My other kind of rebuttal here is I think a lot of boomers think that millennials are just complaining and eating avocado toast. But if you look at cost of living, it hasn't necessarily kept up with income. And that's just a fact. It's the cost of living is significantly a lot higher for us than it is or would have been for a baby boomer. So those are my 3 points.
Thank you for that. Brendan, do you have any other final thoughts for there or follow-ups?
Well, I think at the end of the day, both Hanifa and I can point to statistics that will support our perspective. Like I have a Wall Street Journal article that actually throws some cold water on the affordability of housing. You know, the fact that they were paying so much in double-digit interest rates actually makes the affordability of a home worse for baby boomers. But again, I'll pause there. And then again, coming back to the affordability thing, I think it's what you afford. So ultimately, I think that yes, you made the quip about the avocado toast. Again, I don't think baby boomers were buying $7 coffees and going on European vacations and things like that. So I think the affordability is a choice.
Any last remarks, Hanifa, or we'll leave it at that?
I think we'll leave it at that.
Perfect. Well, I definitely think there's pros and cons to each side, and I think we'll continue to debate this as each side definitely has some good things and some bad things to it. But we want to thank you for joining us today for another Coffee with Waymark.